I'll be honest, MedShiftRX is very fortunate because we don't have a ton of competitors because we do have a very unique business model in which we do sell over 500 different products. That's normally a B2C initiative, but kind of bringing that over to the B2B space, we've seen huge growth and adoption of our loyalty programs. What is your mission? And what is your vision? Who are you wanting to serve? What services are you providing? And then how are you going to deliver those services to your target market?
Welcome back to the SaaS Playbook, the podcast where founders and leaders in the B2B SaaS space who want the honest version of what it takes to build what the revenue side of the business looks like. No fluff, no polish, just a real conversation with people who are in it, in the trenches. This episode is brought to you by Hera Digital. Think of us like doctors, but for your pipeline. We diagnose what's broken and then remedy, and then you build and own forever. So comment Playbook and somebody will reach out to you. Now, today's guest has one of the more interesting layered career paths I've come across. She's moved through sport, events, aesthetics, SaaS, and now healthcare and e-commerce. And she's landed somewhere that sits right in the intersection of all of it with a stronger refocus in 2026. She's now leading a commercial side of MedShiftRX, a healthcare e-commerce marketplace, and brings with her a kind of a cross-industry pattern recognition that very few marketers actually have. Hannah Croft, welcome to the show, and really great to have you here.
Hi, Jenny. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Now, Hannah, your background, like I just listed there, covers quite a lot of ground. Most people pick a lane and sort of stay in it, but what's the thread that connects all of that for you? And when did you realize it was actually an asset rather than a distraction having all of those experiences?
Yeah, so I think the common thread goes back to just my background and experience in marketing. So each career path, each shift kind of built off the last. So I actually ironically started in graphic design. So I started out as a graphic designer working for a national publication that had 40 different segments across the country, online and print. And so from there, doing their digital marketing, then branching out into email, then paid ads. And from there, I jumped over to the sports side of things where I ran all email, branched out a lot in social. And then I was really kind of diving into more of the strategy in my other careers. And, each position propelled me forward in my career by giving me additional skills building off the last. So now in my 15 years of experience, I can say I'm very well-rounded. I have, a lot of different hats that I've worn in the past where I can effectively build omni-channel strategies.
I think you've really experienced it all. I think in 2026, when people think of marketing, they probably think of something to do with AI. In the early 2020s, they probably think more to do with social media. Before that, it was definitely more a different route. So you've really experienced, in terms of marketing and B2B marketing, all of the layers, which does therefore make you a very rounded person, not even mentioning all of the different industries you've sat across, right? And I think for me, I would always argue that the more experiences you have across more industries, the better you will be at presenting that business from a marketing perspective. So it's very, very unique. And if we ever had the time for it, I'd love to actually pick your brain and be like, how did you get from here to here to here to here? But unfortunately, we just don't have the time. But you were the VP of marketing across a lot of arms in the same business.
Yes.
Now technology, financial lending, and now e-commerce. That's a really unusual vantage point, again, adding to your experiences. But what did sitting across all three teach you about how the revenue side of business actually works versus how most people think it works?
Yeah. So I think obviously running 3 arms of a business in a small company of under 50 people was very challenging. I think the biggest challenge with all of that was regardless of, what line of business we were focused on, our ICPs were different across each of those business lines. So really having to streamline how we marketed to each of those segments was really kind of, I think, the biggest challenge. But now that we kind of started the e-commerce side and split off and started MedShiftRX, it allowed us to become a lot more focused. And it's been interesting to see how that focus impacts sales and outcomes because now that we can streamline our focus on one single line of business, we've seen a lot quicker growth and the growth trajectory's gotten even bigger.
I think what really sings out to me, what you just said there, is actually consistency. Having
Mhm.
too many fingers in different pots and pies, you do lose that focus. Adding to what you said just now, and I think a lot of businesses, when they think of growth, most people sort of think vertically, but Midshift has sort of think horizontally, which is really interesting.
Mhm.
I'm not too sure whether that's by chance or if it's something that was really well researched, but I would never think, to be honest with you, to really focus on, I guess, health tech, but then the overlay of e-commerce in that health tech space. So it's a super unique and niche market.
Yeah.
And how does that, obviously, when it comes to healthcare, there's a whole different conversation around regulations and commercials. So it's really, really interesting. And it's not very often that we get to speak to people within a very niche space. Um, when we sort of look at MedShiftRx and the e-commerce side specifically, which is not a space, again, a lot of people are thinking about commercially. From your position, what's the gap you're seeing in how healthcare products actually get distributed and sold? And why has it taken this long for someone to build a proper marketplace around it?
Yeah, so I think the biggest gap is probably just around access and access for our providers. So we're strictly B2B. We only sell to doctors and practitioners. But I think in the past, where these doctors and practitioners have shopped from several different manufacturers, we kind of built the first all in one e commerce platform in which they could get all of their supplies, all of their devices, injectables, and all of that from one single source. And then kind of going back to MedShift growing out versus growing up. I think we're kind of doing both, but the fact that we have then a technology side to support some of the clinical side when doctors come on and we need to verify their credentials, we need to have software for them to submit their prescriptions that are compliant. So, having that technology side of the business has also kind of helped the e commerce side as well. And so, I think it wasn't intentional to grow out, but across those 3 business lines, we do have the resources to each support the other. But yeah, I think the biggest gap is just practitioners having one place to go. They waste a ton of time ordering from different vendors, spending time with different reps, and just having something online that's open 24/7 where they can self-serve was a huge gap that we noticed. And I'll be honest, MedShiftRx is very fortunate because we don't have a ton of competitors because we do have a very unique business model in which we do sell over 500 different products, but then we also kind of position ourselves as a growth partner to where we're not just selling products, we're also offering support, we're offering education, which is huge in the healthcare and aesthetics industry is education, especially with all the changing regulations, new products coming out. I'm sure you've heard of the peptide craze and weight loss. So just trying to navigate all that is very overwhelming. So we like to position ourselves as kind of the single source of truth and the go-to resource for these providers. And I think one of the biggest things that's unique about us is we really serve everyone, even the smaller practices. So we don't require minimum order quantities. So we're also providing access to more of the startups, but we can also support the bigger practices as well.
It's unique. I think that's sort of layering, touching on the e-commerce side a little bit. With e-commerce, it's not necessarily specific to any size, any industry. As more, I think with e-commerce, like you said, it's more about accessibility actually, which is never really a point that I've thought about before. And probably a lot of people don't think about how e-commerce actually plays a role within the market space, especially from a B2B standpoint.
Mhm.
When I think of e-commerce, and I think this is probably a very generalized approach, but people think sort of B2C
Yep, of
more so, right? And I think that you probably
course.
get that
Yeah.
a lot, right? But with having this conversation with yourself and looking more into MedShift RX, is that maybe people do start to look at e-commerce for more a B2B perspective because then you're capitalizing on a market you never had before. When because I think when I speak to a lot of B2B business and founders is they're so focused on that one ICP and this is all I serve and that's it,
Mhm.
right? When it kind of really shuts you off to marketplaces that you actually might do better in, but you don't know until you try.
Mhm.
And I think that's super unique. And I love that MedShift actually leads with education as well. And
Mhm.
before the peptides, it was GLP, right? And then it's just like, how
Mhm.
do you constantly keep up on top of all of that?
Yep.
Now you've made the shift to MedShift RX specifically at the start of the year,
Mhm.
right? Was right as it was separating from the tech and lending side a little bit more and sort of refocusing on those branches. You're essentially helping build the commercial engine on a brand that's now standing fully on its own.
Mhm.
What are you focusing on first, and why are you putting energy into that specific thing right now?
Main focus right now, there's a couple, but I think the biggest one is from product offerings, just with the dynamic environment of the aesthetics industry and, introducing peptides and weight loss, and the regulations that are now coming in. Our biggest focus is moving to pharmacy relationships and making sure we have access, or our clients and customers have access to 503A and 503B products. Just from a compliance standpoint, that's our biggest priority, is moving towards the pharmaceutical side of things. Um, from an e-commerce perspective, our biggest focus right now is kind of on the technology side and the customer experience. So, as you mentioned, e-commerce, you traditionally think B2C. How can we make this a seamless experience for a B2B practitioner, where we're offering wholesale pricing, we're offering for bulk volume discounts, and the platform we use hasn't really been built for that. So it's been getting the tech stack to support everything we want to offer, including a loyalty program where people shop and get cash back. That's normally a B2C initiative, but kind of bringing that over to the B2B space. We've seen huge growth and adoption of our loyalty program. So having the right tech stack to really support our initiatives and make us kind of top of mind for our customers has been the second primary focus, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Just quickly touching on pharmaceuticals. It's a constant. Generally speaking, I have a very weird small experience with pharmaceuticals, is that is constant, right? Because every sort of pharmacy or establishment will have an X amount of requirements every month. So
Mhm.
it's quite standardized, or at least that's a consistent revenue. So I like that. I like that a lot. Clever, clever, Hannah, clever, clever. Speaks to your 15 years of experience. Now, marketplaces, businesses live and die on both sides of the equation. Some do really well, some not so much. You need buyers and sellers. They both need a reason to show up. Who are you really building MedShiftRX for right now? And which side of that marketplace are you prioritizing to get the flywheel moving? Now, you just mentioned two components there with the pharmaceuticals and the more of the tech stack to support what the growth looks like. But can I ask, how did you get to the pharmaceuticals component?
So I think it's kind of just the market we were in. It honestly was just kind of serendipitous. We weren't planning for it. It just so happened. We saw the popularity, we saw the boost in sales, we saw the interest, we were getting the questions, we were being asked for the education. So it was kind of a seamless fit into that space. And so I think us wanting to be at the forefront of that, get ahead of it. We have since hired a board certified pharmacist just to kind of navigate all of the regulations. Like you said, in pharmacy, things change all the time. The FDA is moving things from one list to another list. And just staying on top of all that and being aware so we can effectively keep our customers educated is probably the biggest thing. And I think you asked too about like who we're building it for. And essentially, as I mentioned, it's healthcare practitioners, but we really specialize in those smaller kind of startup clinicians. So just the newer injectors, the people who have been injecting and are looking to expand their offerings. And I think one of the easiest ways for practitioners to expand their offerings has been through peptides. So that's also kind of why we've started going down that road.
I think you have boots on the ground often with all of your direct clients. They're saying, "Hey, Hannah, this is what a lot of our clients are asking for." And that's almost like a direct feedback to you, Hannah,
Mhm.
specifically when it comes down to marketing and product lines and what do we stock and how do we obviously move through the quarters and focus on these specific lines. And I think that's pretty unique because not a lot of times that you get direct feedback by passing through the actual clinicians because their customers would or their patients would tell them what they are looking for.
Mhm.
So then you're like, you get the heads up nice and early. Hey, Hannah, we should probably start stocking this. So I'm not sure if that was on purpose, but I think naturally the natural progression would be that that's what would happen, right? Now, also additional to all of what you do and all of your accolades, you do sit on a board for non for profit,
Oh,
which
yeah.
tells me you are someone who takes meaningful work very seriously, not just the commercial viable work, but how does that mindset show up in the way you're approaching growth at MedShiftRX? And what does the next 6 months actually look like for you?
Yeah, I think in terms of the nonprofit, I mean, it's, really helping students and raising money for scholarships. So doesn't quite marry too well with MedShiftRx, but in the aesthetics industry, it can be very superficial at times. So having something like a nonprofit where I dedicate my time to has really kept me grounded. The people that I sit on the board with are great. And, I think it just gives me like a deeper sense of purpose of using my marketing skills outside of my career for kind of more or less a passion project that also keeps me connected to my community.
I like that. I think especially when we consider tech, we consider okay, well we're in tech, we're in sort of high roles. How do we bring ourselves back to level ground? And I
Yeah.
think doing that actively does. But I think, and this is just a sidestep, maybe you can help people who want to get younger students want to get scholarships within the health tech space or the e-commerce
Mhm.
space. So therefore, it's a little bit translatable, but I can understand why you probably want a little bit of separation.
Yeah. Yeah. I work enough hours a week.
Yeah, you're like, "Okay, I don't need to think about it, 80 hours a week."
Yes, although my
Uh,
coworkers do come to the events, which is great, and they're
oh,
fun.
that's really sweet. That's really sweet. It tells me that and it's funny you said that because a lot of people who have been doing roles for 8 plus years typically need something to reground themselves. So
Mhm.
when I say that they are boards for non for profit, they go to the food bank and they do something else and they over time you've done served your years, but over time you need something that actually feels the heart and the soul more. And it's pretty funny you say that because almost every other conversation on this podcast has that theme, especially within the tech space. So it's so interesting. But for me, my mental health thing that I focus on outside of work and outside of tech is fishing, oddly. So
Yeah.
I don't even like eating fish. I just like catching it for some reason. One last question for you, Anna, before we start to wrap things up. Now, you've been in rooms where strategy looked really great on paper and rooms where it actually worked. And you've clearly learned how to tell the difference over time. For a founder who is trying to figure out which side they're on, what's the one question they should honestly be asking themselves right now?
I think the biggest question to be asking is, well, I guess this kind of is too, like, what is your mission? And what is your vision? Who are you wanting to serve? What services are you providing? And then how are you going to deliver those services to your target market? And getting very clear on that, I think, is the first thing you need before launching a new product, before starting a new business, before building a new tech capability. I think you really need to put yourself in the customer's shoes and figure out why you're doing what you're doing, which is your mission, and then how you're going to accomplish that and solve someone's problem or pain point through the vision.
And that's another consistent theme that pops up in this on this podcast, I should say. But and it's really interesting to see that it's actually more common that the same things pop up for in women. So
Right.
the passion thing, but also refocusing on the mission and who you're trying to serve. Second, So it
Hmm.
just tells me that women obviously approach things from a more nurturing perspective and a more purposeful perspective. And I'm not saying that is biased. I'm just saying factually, that's what we've
Yeah.
observed. So it's been really nice because yesterday we've had another a female founder in Australia. So that was really interesting. And it's almost not the exact replica, but the themes are very much the same.
Yeah.
And it warms my heart, is all
I
I'm
think
trying to
I've learned that over the years too. Like that's obviously through trial and error because there have been times where, I've been in a room where myself or someone else has had a really good idea and we're like, this is great. How do we make this work? But if it doesn't fit into your brand or your business model, then, it won't be successful.
You won't last very long. I found, especially, I can't speak on everybody else, but for me, if I don't believe in the vision or the passion, on average, I last about 15 months. Looking at
Yeah.
my past career, I'm like, okay, I've conquered what I needed to conquer in about a year's time. What else can I do? And if I can't progress forward, I typically leave,
Yeah.
which I don't
Yeah,
know
I
if that's a
think
good
that's
thing or a bad
another
thing.
that's another key thing too when going back to my career kind of between different industries, B2B and B2C, to always be growing and your path forward should always be growth or look like growth.
Yeah. And stop staying comfortable. That word
Yeah.
scares the daylights out of me, Hannah, and I feel like you're on the same trajectory as me because you don't like to sit still for too long. And that generally means the reverse side of that is growth, right? So it's
Mhm.
constantly, just like you said, always looking for growth. Now, Hannah, that was a really good one, a very passionate one. We covered a lot of ground and the cross industry background, the transition to MedShiftRX, and the honest take on what it actually takes to build a commercial engine, specifically in the e commerce space. Most people wouldn't even have no idea, no inclination of thinking about it from a B2B perspective, like
Mhm.
myself. But links to connect with Hannah and learn about MedShiftRX will be in the show notes below. And if you're ready to build a sales engine, you know where to find us. In the meantime, keep building meaningfully. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Jenny.